think is uh I think a lot of Joe Rogan. Like I spent a lot of like just a ridiculous amount of time thinking about Joe
I've talked
Rogan.
about Joe
Yeah,
Rogan before on the show, and I so let's get into it because I'm always fascinated. It's his trajectory is such a
I'm
fascinating one.
fascinated. Like someone as a straight guy that like at some point was interested in performance and making like
Hmm.
I listened to his podcast a while ago. And he used to bring, or and he still does bring like proper scientists of all like medical researchers, like astrophysicists, like bring to the conversation and like and talk about these things. Uh, but increasingly he started bringing and like obviously he lost his man during COVID, but he started like bringing people to talk about a lot of topics from archaeology like that are obviously not completely unqualified to talk about the sex because they're just like and I'm obsessed with this the archaeologists he brings, like all these people that are like do the
Yeah,
research on
the Graham
the Graham
Hancock
Hancocks,
and
exactly,
yeah, all
like
this.
all those people,
Yeah.
because they talk about scientific topics, they like frame themselves as like scientists and researchers, but the way they talk about themselves as like the narrative they tell about themselves is often that of like heretics being expelled out of like the proper
Yeah,
academia, the
underdog
underdog story and stuff.
story.
And what does like that those stories that like they tell about themselves and like Joe Rogan likes to promote of the we're just asking questions, that kind of attitude taps into like very strong cultural narratives that we have established through generations of like free thinking and like idealism and masculinity, and like it taps to all those things in ways that are
Well, and especially very American
exactly
ones
very
too,
very good.
right? The idea of like the rugged individualism, pull yourself up and carve your way.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah, like that's a good summarization of like the allow the amount of like norms and values and beliefs that like those narratives and those ways of presenting their science, this like underdog science, uh, quote unquote. I have to do this like I say quote unquote because I don't want people to like
Yeah.
really think
Yeah.
that like I believe that Graham Hancock is like an actual underdog, but uh, so the and that is like has been so effective for like promoting these wacky like esoteric pseudo scientific beliefs and like promoting these people to sell their books and promote their supplements and whatever they're selling, uh because it is tapping to like pre-exist or not pre-existing because they don't exist from that like cultural worldviews, and they're tapping to like how many people in our society, not everyone, like but mostly straight white dudes feel about uh like the world. And that is something that
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
as science communicators can learn a ton about, uh, because
Hmm.
the stories that like science communication tells are often tapping into worldviews and beliefs that like some people have but not everyone, and they're tapping to ways of looking at the world that can that like people can resonate with, but not with everyone's like way of looking at the world. And I'm not talking about like straight white dudes because that is not like the demographic I'm really interested in. I'm interested in like minorities. I'm interested in those people that like disaffected from or have been disaffected from science. I'm talking about like many different communities around the world, and not just in like Europe and the US and whatever, but around like anywhere. uh the stories that we tell about science are still about the big scientists that discovered like a big cure and a big thing, or like like a big project that is doing such and such. And those stories I don't think are necessarily tapping into people's like into certain communities lived experience, and that is why a lot of people are reacting to science in ways that are like, well, I don't trust those people. Like, why would I trust like these people in universities that are doing who knows what with that money that we're giving them from our tax? uh but rather they are tapping like all these other folks that like tell themselves as the quote unquote underdog are rather tapping into those feelings of like of like, oh, I work so hard to get a living to establish a family, blah 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 blah. and and yeah, I don't know if I'm making much sense around this thought, but this is something that like I'm trying to articulate, and this is like a research proposal that I have in my head of how do we understand the kind of the worldview narrative component of what like influencers and grifters and science grifters are doing, and how can we
Mm-hmm.
learn from that experience and like apply it to like science communication that actually can improve people's lives, can increase rates of vaccination, can get people to like engage with science in like interesting,
A
cool, in
positive,
positive ways,
yeah.
something that like improves well-being of people rather than like being angry at the elites in the universities for X or Y reason. Like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yes, I think I do. And I mean, not to be pessimistic, but I mean, it's like you see the challenge with that right off the bat to me is because that underdog story, is so, especially, I think, especially in the time that we're living in where there's like a backlash against elites, a backlash against institutions, all of these things are seen to be not working for us, or that they're hiding things from us, that kind of thing. That inequality plays into that, just like income inequality, and it all plays into this us versus them. The big guy, the big things, are keeping things from the rest of us, right? Like that's such a strong narrative. But then if you start to try and I know like the instinct is to debunk, right? And I'm not convinced that debunking does anything. Like I don't know at all, right? And I hate doing it. Like I hate, like there's obviously, there's like, if I'm being honest, there's like a smug kind of satisfaction that you might get from being like, well actually that's not how it worked, no, and that whole thing. But like nobody's going to listen to that, really, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just doing that for your own little audience, your own little echo bubble, I think. But anyway, but so then how do you deal with that, right? So that's where I'm starting first. How do you deal with that? How do you combat that narrative without coming across as a gatekeeper, an elitist, all of these things? So that I think is super challenging. And then if we look at how do you use similar narratives or tap into similar worldviews in order to, as you say, for a more, like, let's say, positive outcome, how do we do that? So then do you try and position science as an institution, right, as this broad thing, which is difficult to do because scientists are all individuals and they all have their individual motivations, and we just talked about how many cultures are involved in science. Do you try and take that, let's just again quote unquote science, and position it as the underdog against capitalism, against corrupt politicians, again, I think maybe there's something there, and I think a lot of scientists would probably feel that message might resonate with them, especially, look at a place like the US where budgets are being slashed, and all of these research is being cut for what, for tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires and stuff. So that could be a powerful message. But it's difficult to sort of, it's almost like you can't have it both ways, right? You can't eat your cake and have it too, because you want to say science is everywhere. Science is this thing that powers our whole society, but yet it's also not, it's not part of the elite. It's not, like it's not this top-down institution, ivory tower, all of that. It's really hard to play both of those things, right? Like, so how do you do that? Is it individual stories? Is it like individual characters, and we've seen attempts
Yeah.
at that, right? Like the hidden figures and all of this stuff. I don't know. I don't have any data, but I'm not sure that it's resonating. It's all this to say, I think it's an incredibly challenging thing, and I'm looking at it again as like, let's say if we want to just combat that grifter thing that's going on, the pseudoscience, you see it in health, archaeology, you see it everywhere, right?